Welcome, Gino. Really nice to see you. Thanks for coming up. I think we've got quite a surprise here for you today. I know this is out of your way and off your beaten track, but I know that your viewers are going to have a wonderful treat in store to see what we're going to show them today. This gentleman is from a town very close to where I grew up, and he's about my same age, and for the last 40 years he's been quietly buying himself, financing himself, lovely choice old houses, and he's got great attention to detail. As you know, I travel all over New England, and I don't know of anybody who puts any more time and effort into finding special old properties and restoring them. So since you have the time, I'm going to introduce you to Doug, and he will tell you all the wonderful anecdotes how this took place. Are you running?
Well, sure.
Well, this is the famous Mr. Toll right here.
There he is. Yes, and
it's a pleasure to meet you, Doug.
well,
Thank you so
it's
much
nice to meet you too, Gino. I'm glad you could make it up here today.
So this is your place.
It is.
Could you give us a little history and maybe take us on a little tour?
Sure. As you may know, I'm a native of the area, grew up in this area, and about 40 years ago, someone took a 20-year-old something kid and gave him a tour of their old home. They were so proud of all the beams and the fireplaces and the glass and the plaster. It kind of changed my life. It sounds a little deep, I know, but it did. That one evening of the tour. And for the last 42 years, my quest has been finding these old places that need attention and trying to put some life back into them. And I've been, as I said, I thought I was all through with the last one. It was exactly what I had wanted. It was a restoration of an old store, and I was happy there. And someone knocked on my door, basically, and he said, we have a family homestead we'd like to have you buy. And I said, no, I'm getting along in age, in my 60s, and it takes longer, it's expensive. And he said, well, it's been in our family for 12 generations. And because you can imagine 12 generations, that brings it back pretty damned early. And I said, when the heck was it built? And it was built in 1665. So it's an authentic first period William and Mary Pilgrim house. And this is it. This is it standing over here. And they had, the Historical Society in Billerica had wanted to retain it for obvious reasons. But as long, a lot of historical societies don't have the funding to, to maintain and to rebuild and to furnish, so it became available to me. And I'd never done a pilgrim or an authentic home of this vintage. I'd done federals and colonials and all that, so it was a challenge that I had to take. Well, you asked me to give you a little tour of the property, and I think what I'd like to do is tell you how it came about. And that was, as I say, this building came to me as an opportunity to put up, and I looked for a piece of land that seemed appropriate in this town, simply because I worked nearby. And this piece of land here with this panorama kind of speaks for itself. The gentleman who owned it was reluctant to sell it, but he's getting along, as we all are, and eventually did. And when I acquired the land, it was all trees, completely just like you see out here, all the way across. And we decided that we would clear the land, cut the trees, pull the stumps, and open this whole area up, which we've done. Then the next step was to consider, what are we going to do with the property? What was going to be the layout of the buildings? And a local person, Henry Page, who's helped me with every project, came along and had the idea of contouring the land so that we built this hill. It was a flat piece of land, it was an apple orchard. Build a hill here and make a roadway rather than a driveway up to the house so that this house could sit facing the view, and then the side view, the peripheral view, would be exposed from the road so you could see the salt blocks, which was, I thought, a stroke of genius, because it was my money that was being spent to do this. So as we built the house, we didn't build the house, we came up here and we're building the stone walls, is what I meant to say, and the walls all came from other places here in New England, because we're famous for our stone walls with the rocks that came here from the glacial age. And we built the walls here completely, all local fellows did, all dry laid without any strings or anything that made them perfectly square. And so then I'm getting a little bored. This is happening, and it's taking all this time to pull trees and stumps and rocks and all that this little building down here sat down at the bottom of the hill. And it was really pretty in dilapidated shape, and I kind of wondered what it was. It had the look of a schoolhouse, but then again it had these big doors in the front, and it was listing, and the sills were rotting, and And I inquired of the people in town what it was, and they said it was a schoolhouse. And it turned out to be owned by the same man that I bought the land from. So, long story short, I got the building, and the state allowed me to move it on a Sunday morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, with state troopers front and back, with the idea that if one of the walls had caved in, I had to push it into the field. And I got it up here, and I didn't know what the front of it looked like because it had all been cut out back in the 20s to make it a salt and sand shed. And one of the people that I work with said his grandmother had been a teacher here back in the early 1900s. And he had a picture of her out front with her students, 1909. So that then told us how the door and the transom light and the windows in the front were to be set. And we followed that example and reconstructed it just the way it was originally. Further study found that this closed in 1917. So it had been closed for, what, 92 years as a schoolhouse. There were some 18 of them in the town originally. So the process began of reconstructing it and getting a stone foundation, and the clapwoods on the outside are all quarter-sawn clapwoods from the little town of Moortown, Vermont, and they're all shiplapped. And we even had, I like to say, $5,000 worth of handmade rosette-headed nails used in the exterior of it, which is the way it would have been back at that time. The whole frame is hand-hewn pine. And we found that when we took the plaster down inside that all the lathing was hand split, and there are thousands of handmade nails, and because they've all been saved in there as part of the history of the house, of the schoolhouse. And then the process began of getting the shingles and digging the brick up out of the ground. Those are all been dug up where there have been 18th century houses, and reconstructing the building.